We will now reveal the extraordinary story of the woman who predicted the rise of Adolf Hitler 1 year before he was actually born. Her name was Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, and in 1888 she wrote a chilling prophecy that would prove to be one of the most accurate and terrifying predictions in human history. What she saw in her vision was so specific, so impossibly precise, that it challenges everything we think we know about time, consciousness, and the nature of prophecy itself. In 1888, a mysterious Russian woman wrote these chilling words: "It is as though a heartless, proud fiend, assuming sudden authority, incarnate ambition and power, had clutched with iron hand the minds of a whole country." She was describing Adolf Hitler, who wouldn't be born for another year. This is Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, known to the world as Madame Blavatsky. To her followers, she was a visionary who possessed ancient wisdom. To her critics, she was an elaborate fraud, accused of faking psychic phenomena, of forging letters from spiritual masters, and of plagiarizing her revolutionary ideas. But in 1888, when she penned what she called her karmic visions, something extraordinary happened. She described with terrifying accuracy a figure who would not emerge for decades, a man who would plunge the world into darkness. The year was 1888. Europe was at peace. The German Empire was stable under Kaiser Wilhelm I. There was no hint of the horrors to come, and in a small room, this controversial mystic put pen to paper and wrote words that would haunt history. By what wicked enchantment has he brought the people back to those primeval days of the nation when their ancestors, the yellow-haired Suevi, and the treacherous Franks roamed about in their warlike spirit, thirsting to kill, to decimate and subject each other. She continued, "The world is hushed in breathless expectation. The cloud is approaching. It comes nearer and nearer. O woe and horror! I foresee once more for Earth the suffering I have already witnessed." This wasn't ancient history she was describing. This was prophecy. And 1 year later, on April 20th, 1889, a baby named Adolf Hitler was born in an Austrian inn. Utterly anonymous, indistinguishable from millions of other infants across Europe. There was absolutely nothing to suggest this specific child would embody the darkness Blavatsky had described. But what exactly did Blavatsky see in her vision, and how could her description be so impossibly accurate? Let's examine her prophecy line by line, because the details are absolutely chilling. First, she described the coming figure as a heartless, proud fiend assuming sudden authority. This perfectly captures Hitler's rapid rise from obscurity to absolute power. In just 15 years, Hitler went from a failed art student living in poverty to the leader of Germany. His rise was indeed sudden and shocking. Most political observers in the 1920s didn't take him seriously. But notice the word fiend. Blavatsky didn't just predict a dictator or a tyrant. She used a word that suggests something demonic, something inhuman. Those who met Hitler often commented on his strange, hypnotic eyes and his ability to seem possessed when giving speeches. Many described feeling that they were in the presence of something evil that transcended ordinary human malice. Next, she wrote about incarnate ambition and power that would clutch with iron hand the minds of a whole country. This is a perfect description of how Nazi control worked. It wasn't just political oppression, it was psychological domination. The Nazis didn't just control people's actions. They controlled their thoughts, their emotions, their very sense of reality. But here's where it gets truly eerie. Blavatsky wrote about a wicked enchantment that would overtake the German people. This phrase is extraordinarily precise when we consider how Hitler actually gained and maintained power. Nazi rallies were designed as theatrical spectacles that created a kind of hypnotic effect on audiences. The torchlight processions, the rhythmic chanting, the carefully choreographed movements, the thunderous music, all were calculated to bypass rational thought and appeal directly to primitive emotions. Witnesses described feeling swept away by forces beyond their control, as if they were under a spell. The word enchantment suggests magic, sorcery, supernatural influence, and indeed many of Hitler's inner circle were deeply involved in occult practices. Heinrich Himmler believed in ancient Germanic magic. Rudolf Hess consulted astrologers. The Nazi Party itself adopted symbols like the swastika and SS runes that were supposed to carry mystical power. But the most chilling part of Blavatsky's vision was how she described this figure awakening something ancient and primitive in the German people. She wrote about him bringing them back to those primeval days of the nation when their ancestors, the yellow-haired Suevi, and the treacherous Franks roamed about in their warlike spirit, thirsting to kill, to decimate and subject each other. Now let's consider the timing. Blavatsky wrote these words in 1888. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20th, 1889, just months later. As a crying infant in the small Austrian town of Braunau am Inn, Hitler showed no signs of the future dictator he would become. His father, Alois, was a customs official. His mother, Clara, was a housewife who doted on her son. There was nothing in their family history to suggest that their child would one day orchestrate the most systematic genocide in human history. Young Adolf was, by all accounts, an ordinary boy in an ordinary family, yet somehow Blavatsky had perceived the dark forces that would shape not just one man, but an entire era. How is this possible? Skeptics argue that Blavatsky wasn't describing Hitler specifically, but rather a type of tyrant, tapping into timeless fears of demagogues and war. They point out that her metaphorical language could be interpreted in many ways after events occurred, a phenomenon called retroactive clairvoyance. But this explanation falls apart when we examine the specificity of her vision. She didn't just predict a generic tyrant. She described someone who would specifically arise in Germany, who would use psychological manipulation, wicked enchantment, who would appeal to ancient Germanic tribal instincts, the Suevi and Franks, and who would bring unprecedented suffering to Europe. Moreover, this wasn't Blavatsky's only accurate prediction. In the same period, she made several other prophecies that proved remarkably precise. She predicted that between 1888 and 1897, there would be a large rent made in the veil of nature, and materialistic science will receive a death blow. This prophecy came true with stunning accuracy. In 1895, Wilhelm Röntgen discovered X-rays. In 1896, Henri Becquerel discovered radioactivity. In 1897, J.J. Thomson discovered the electron. These discoveries revolutionized physics and proved that matter was not solid and indivisible, as 19th century materialists believed. They revealed invisible forces and energies that transformed our understanding of reality. She also predicted that the 20th century would bring accidental discoveries of ancient manuscripts that would challenge established religious narratives. The 20th century indeed brought the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi texts, and other archaeological finds that revolutionized our understanding of ancient religions. But it was her vision of Hitler that proved most terrifying in its accuracy. She saw not just the man, but the mechanism of his power, the nature of his appeal, and the consequences of his reign, all before he was even born. How did she claim to access this knowledge? Blavatsky taught that she had been trained by advanced spiritual masters who possessed complete knowledge of past, present, and future. These beings, she claimed, understood the karmic patterns that govern individual lives and civilizations. According to Blavatsky, what we call history is actually the playing out of deeper spiritual forces. Events that seem random or accidental are actually the result of causes set in motion long ago. Those with sufficient spiritual development can perceive these patterns and predict their outcomes. She believed that the rise of figures like Hitler was inevitable, given the spiritual state of humanity in the late 19th century. The growing materialism, the abandonment of spiritual values, the rise of racial thinking, all of these were creating the conditions for a massive karmic backlash. From this perspective, Hitler wasn't just a political accident, but the inevitable result of humanity's collective choices. The suffering he caused was terrible but necessary, a harsh lesson that would eventually force humanity to choose between its higher and lower nature. This doesn't excuse or minimize the horror, but it places it within a larger framework of meaning. According to Theosophical teachings, even the darkest periods in human history serve a purpose in the soul's evolution. Whether or not you accept Blavatsky's spiritual explanations, the historical facts are undeniable. In 1888, she described with remarkable accuracy the rise of a figure who would not appear for decades. She perceived his methods, his appeal, and his impact before he was even born. This challenges our basic assumptions about time, consciousness, and human potential. If Blavatsky could see Hitler coming, what else might she have perceived? What other warnings did she leave that we haven't yet understood? In her writings, Blavatsky predicted that the 20th century would be a time of unprecedented testing for humanity. She saw it as a period when all the accumulated karma of previous ages would come to fruition. The wars, the genocides, the technological horrors, all were part of a vast sorting process that would determine humanity's future direction. But she also saw hope beyond the darkness. She predicted that after the period of testing, humanity would enter a new cycle of spiritual awakening. The suffering would serve as a catalyst for a higher understanding of human unity and purpose. Looking back, we can see signs that this prophecy too has been fulfilled. The horrors of 2 world wars and the Holocaust created a new international consciousness. The United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Civil Rights Movement, all emerged from humanity's determination to prevent such tragedies from recurring. Yet Blavatsky's warnings remain relevant today. She taught that the forces leading to conflict and suffering don't disappear, they simply take new forms. The same materialism and racial thinking that created the conditions for Hitler's rise are still present in our world, manifesting in different ways. Her vision reminds us that the forces shaping our world often operate beneath the surface of visible events. The rise of Hitler wasn't just a political accident, but the culmination of deeper currents in human consciousness, currents that someone with sufficient insight could perceive long before they manifested in physical reality. As we face our own uncertain times with rising authoritarianism and social division around the world, Blavatsky's story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Are there similar forces building in our own era? Are there warnings being given today that we, like her contemporaries, might be ignoring? The woman who saw Hitler coming before he was born claimed that history follows predictable patterns. She taught that those who understand these patterns can perceive approaching storms long before they break. In 1888, Helena Blavatsky wrote about a heartless, proud fiend who would enchant a nation and bring unprecedented suffering to the world. 1 year later, the man who would fulfill that prophecy was born. Whether through spiritual insight, psychic ability, deep understanding of human nature, or historical cycles, Blavatsky demonstrated a prophetic gift that challenges everything we think we know about the nature of time and consciousness. Her warning echoes across the decades. The forces that create monsters like Hitler are always present, always waiting for the right conditions to emerge. The question is not whether such darkness will rise again, but whether we will recognize the signs and have the wisdom to stop it. Blavatsky claimed to see the hidden currents shaping history. The deeper question remains, are we listening?